taken their time. I'll be brief as I can be. But the Tennessee legislature has been in control of alcohol permitting for years and years and years. They delegated to cities and counties the right to regulate sale of beer. Regulate, or didn't designate or delegate the right to regulate liquor. Liquor by the drink is regulated by the state. You can, as long as you get a state permit, you can sell liquor by the drink anywhere within, someone said, 6 inches of a church, school, or place of public gathering. Under TCA 575105, the legislature adopted rules that say cities and counties can regulate the sale of beer within a 2,000-foot distance from places of public gathering. And that term, place of public gathering, is significant. That does, of course, encompass schools, churches, probably entertainment hall, something like that would qualify, but place of public gathering is important. You can't, cities and counties can't adopt a rule that restricts distance beyond 2,000 feet, but anything under 2,000 feet they can regulate. They can regulate the sale of beer, cities and counties. In our current code, and I think Vicki's copied that, the beer code, or section of the municipal code that regulates or relates to intoxicating liquors, section 8, 101 through 107. We set a distance of 1,200 feet. We prohibited sale of beer within 1,200 feet of those places of public gathering, and it says within any, close to school, church, or other place of public gathering. Now, there's no mention in that of residences. The state did allow cities to regulate distance from residences, but that's not part of our municipal ordinance. And our municipal ordinance says that the distance is to be measured from property line to property line. In a 1966 case, which was before we adopted this ordinance, the Tennessee Supreme Court, in a Davidson County Beer Board case, held that the purpose for the restriction was to regulate the sale of beer within buildings, not on a property. You can have a small structure in a 1,000-acre parcel, and if you measured from boundary to boundary, it could be miles. So the Supreme Court struck down Davidson County's restrictions, holding it was arbitrary and unreasonable to enforce it from property line to property line. So that is what our municipal code refers to, and it's not been tested. We had, let's see, before I came back, there was an application by a restaurant, I guess called Rebel Yell, that was that in Billy Kim's old judo studio restaurant?
Yes.
That just sort of died when it was appealed to city council. That's what I understand, and it went no further. I think that if that were judicially tested, we may not be able to defend that from property line to property line. Now, churches change locations, businesses change locations, and here in the city we have a situation, and I'm just going to use that specific church that was used in the measurement of that case to highlight an anomaly in the Churchill Code. The Kenjo at that intersection, Silver Lake Road and 11W, has a beer permit. They've had a beer permit for as long as I can remember. And after they got the permit, the church was built between the railroad and Old Stage Road. I don't know the name of that church specifically, but that's the church that was used for measurement and denying Rebel Yell their permit. The Kenjo, according to my regulations, the Kenjo is, or my calculations, and I use Tennessee real estate data. You may have another measurement or another means for measuring, but I just did the distance.
Ariel has the bird files.
Yeah. The Kenjo 722.17 feet from that church. That restaurant, building to building, not property line to property line, but building to building, that restaurant in the old Billy Kim building would have been 1,253.89 feet. Now, Chad, and I understand you help with measurements, but that may be at a slight variance from what measurements were used. But you've got 700 versus 1,200. We've got a business selling beer within 700 feet, but we've in the past rejected applications for somebody that's 1,200 feet away, because that's what our municipal code says. So,
Can I ask a question, Chris?
yes, sure.
Kenjo,
Yeah.
along with grocery store, they sell beer, 6-pack, whatever. What Rebel Yell was wanting to do is sell open beer, drink it on the premises. Is there
There's no distinction.
no distinction?
It's either they're authorized to sell it in any fashion or they're not. So,
And two, if you think people are not going in and buying that beer and coming out into their car and popping that top.
well,
Yeah,
I think the point that he's making is
Right,
they
I
can't sit there and
understand.
get a bowl of pretzels and have a
Right.
beer at the. Now, I would recommend that we look at our municipal code and at least clean up this property line versus building measurement issue. And I don't think that tiny change is going to affect acceptance or denial of requests for permits in the future. But what we had come before us in the last couple of meetings is not a request for a permit. Let's make that clear. There's not been a request for a permit from anybody that's close to Volunteer. The El Patrillo restaurant has not asked, to my knowledge, not filed an application for permit.
No.
Chad would know.
No.
So, I would recommend that we address that problem in our code. And I want to point out to you some things that the fellow called to our attention. And Dennis asked me to research other municipalities in the county and the county. He provided us this printout, but there's a couple of others that he didn't put on there. That,
Well, I wondered about that.
well, in particular, Hawkins County. This chart, let's see, you weren't there, Mr. Grigsby, at the last meeting. He handed this out. I've got another one here. Mount Carmel's distance regulation is 400 feet. Sir Gonzal's is 300. Kingsport is 300. Rogersville is 250. Marshtown is 0. Just like the state. State has no regulation. Hawkins County, well, Bulls Gap is 1,500 feet. Hawkins County's is 1,400 feet. Hawkins County goes a step further and says not within 300 feet of a residential dwelling if the owner objects. So we looked at the zoning after the last meeting here. The Rebel Yell is in a business zone. So if there's a residence near that business zone, people that live there bought knowing that they're buying next to a business zone. And again, for the state, there's no restriction. So Rebel Yell could have, I don't know if they did get a liquor by the drink.
They did.
Yes,
Did
they
they?
did.
They did.
But they couldn't sell beer.
Correct.
And that was what they came to us. So, that's a policy decision for you all to make. I don't take a stance. I just point out, this is what other communities have done, and it's for you to consider whether or not we should address the distance requirement in light of the factual scenario of surrounding counties. I think Hawkins County's has been tested, and let's see, there was a case, Sir Gainesville had different requirements for businesses on 11W as opposed to the old highway. And Judge Wright found in a case, a more recent case, that they couldn't do that. That it didn't matter whether they were selling beer on 11W or on Main Street. That it had to, that was what he called an arbitrary or capricious decision.
So it had to be consistent.
It had to be consistent. You couldn't put a shorter distance on the highway than you could in downtown. So,
I mean, one thing for sure I think we need to clear up is how it's measured. Is there any clarity on how these other, is everybody using bird's eye distance?
well, bird's eye is not, bird's eye has to be, it's the direct distance.
Okay,
You can't say by road.
okay.
I think that's been,
So they're using
that's
some
clear.
sort of an aerial type measurement, whether it's Google Maps or
Yeah.
Tennessee property
Yeah.
data or whatever.
Or just an actual physical measurement.
Yeah.
Chad, how did y'all measure the distances before?
Every time I've measured, I've used Google
Google Maps.
Earth to
to do direct lines.
And you can get within a foot
Right.
or 2 feet, and I don't think
Yeah, we've never been that close that it's.
that's
come
made
up.
a difference. So we don't have an application that would on its face be excluded. There's no urgency in that regard, but it's something to think about. I was just asked to check with local municipalities. I talked to Allen County, the county attorney, and these are the facts for you all to consider.
So basically, we just need to change from property line to property line to building to building. Is that what we're saying? Our ordinance needs to read?
Yes, it should, regardless of what the distance
Yes.
measurement is. And if you're gonna make a change, now would be a convenient time to do that.
Hey, may I ask a question?
Sure.
So in our ordinance, in our charter here, in our ordinance, we do have a specification between on-premise and off-premise permits. Can we not do that? Is that what you're saying? We can't?
No. It's,
So if a company, and I won't call no names, but if a company sells beer, Chris,
yeah,
if they decide, that company, to sell beer and decide to let them drink it there, city's out of that, correct?
yes.
It's 8-211.
They would have to get a new permit.
Would they, Chris?
On-site consumption.
On 8-6 is the page number.
My understanding is you can't discriminate between on-site and off-site. That's my understanding. Now, I can research that further. But,
I think we need to do that.
I'm not 100% sure because that may have been something that may have been brought up between the Kenjo and Rebel Yell.
Well, that's certainly how ours reads right now. Is
Yeah, it does.
They're off premise. I mean, if we have.
And on our
if we're
beer
out of
permits
compliance
that we
with
give
the
out,
state,
it
we have to
says,
be in compliance with what the state. If there
it
is
says
a law, we can't
off-premise.
discriminate that, right?
Yeah, cause that could really open up a can of worms,
Make a bias.
big time, for the city.
A lot of restaurants, they will not let you get an alcohol drink to go. They did during COVID, I
They
believe.
won't.
But they don't let you take one, have one to go. From what I've seen, and
I think they'll sell you closed containers to go. They won't give you one like.
maybe that's
they won't mix you.
violation of
Right, they won't give
container
you,
law.
yeah. They'll sell like bottles and things like that. And now whether they're doing it legally or illegally, I don't know.
I think,
two different
I
permits,
think
even with the
restaurants
state.
can do that.
There's two different types of permits, even state requires that. One's on-site and one's off-site.
It's under Tennessee Code Annotated 50.
So even if a company decides,
They would have to come in and apply for a new permit.
And you-
And they would, and I get what Chris is saying about the measurements. You can't say on-site's one measurement and off-site's different. But these businesses would have to come in and apply for a new permit, then they would fall under the new restrictions that, so that's,
so if that's the case, then we could, when I say we, the city could not allow to sell it, like it, Ken Joe's used the example, and sit there and drink it. We do, the city does control that.
correct. Because that's the only permit they
You see
have.
that, Chris?
I hear what you're saying. I don't know that that's permissible, but I'll research it.
Okay. Well, can we also not put something in there, like if our Rebel Yell, like you said, in a residential area?
I think that gets into our zoning stuff though.
Yeah, so
If it's-
what
if
we
it's-
found is that there's a house next to that building.
Right.
You could put a residence restriction
That's what I'm saying.
in the code.
It's not in here now. Can we not do that? What we found out at the last meeting, we went in and looked at the zoning, Chris and I did. what I thought the old stage there was an R1, it wasn't, what was it, a B3? See, that's, because I kept wondering how they got that zone that way under R1.
Yeah, so the house next to it is still, it's a R1, right?
B3.
The house next to it.
Yeah, that entire section is B3, like that whole.
The house is in in that particular situation, I think the house is in a commercial zone.
Yeah.
So how far is that commercial zone? The whole
It's
street?
there on the map
It's
on
like
the
a pie
lot.
shape, Ken, it goes all the way up old 11W. And I think that's probably when they done it, they were looking at that before those houses were all built.
See, because if you remember, I stated, how did we ever get a zone like that in R1?
Yeah.
Then Chris and I reviewed it after a meeting, and it's not R1, it's B3.
So,
So it goes back to what Chris, I didn't mean to interrupt you, it goes back to what Chris says. They had to know if they didn't, shame on them, when they bought in there, that it was a B3.
so which permit did Rebel Hill apply for?
On-site
On-site consumption?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you also, like, Chris, part of the thing I think we're getting confused on, like, on the on-site consumption, you have to sell so much food and stuff too. That's what makes it different than a convenience store or grocery store.
Now, it doesn't.
So much of your sales has to be
Building residential,
for that.
because it goes B3 down, so B3, B2, B1, R2, R1, everything under since we changed that.
Okay.
But that's all B3.
Did you all,
They can set up a house to a business if they want to or whatever.
if you don't care, Chad, repeat that again? What you
So like on your permits, when you apply for these through the state or through us, there's so much has to be about food consumption on site. That's what makes them different than like a grocery store. You gotta have so much sales for each one.
So this is state restrictions, not
They
city?
do restrict it too. State does and
That's
us.
what I mean, about the restaurant part.
Right.
So I really think that what we've been told here this morning and the research that Chris has done, that we need to leave here this morning, clean this up for the city, ever how we choose to go and get this behind us, don't you, Chris?
That's my recommendation. And again, I don't make policy, religious or political recommendations. That's the city's province, not mine.
And you will clarify, of course.
I
Chad,
can clarify whatever we need to.
on site,
Yes, on site.
that needs to be
Yeah,
clarified.
I'll clear that up.
You know, we might have a lot of businesses walk in and they're drinking on site.
I'll clear that up. So that's it for me.
So what's y'all's feelings on this? We need to leave here and give him a direction.
Well, we definitely need to change the measurement, how we measure it.
Building to building.
Building to
Building,
building.
building, but now distance, that's up for discussion. I think 1,200 is way too much.
I agree.
But, you know, I guess, I don't know when this original ordinance was done, back,
2007, I believe.
the original one about selling beer in Churchill. Is that when the footage was put in?
That was when the distance section was last modified.
It used to be more than that and we lowered it to 1,200.
Okay.
I forget what it was. You remember what it was?
I didn't think we ever had permits until 2007 for on-site consumption.
No, I'm talking about the distance.
Right, but I think they're
Selling.
right. I think the reason we redone it in 07 was because we decided to adopt for on-site consumption. But before, it was, I think it was 1,400 feet. But
I
it
think
was
that's
just
what it
for sale, retail sale of alcohol,
I
not
was
on-site.
here, but I don't remember.
I think Chad's right on that. It was 1,400 feet. We lowered it to 12. So what's the distance you all were thinking of?
The highest other distance is Mount Carmel at 400.
Are those correct, those distances?
The ones that he gave us, they are correct. But we've added Bulls Gap. Bulls Gap, he didn't have Bulls Gap in Hawkins County. And they're 1,500 and 1,400 respectively.
I agree with Keith, I think 400 is a good distance.
I disagree. I don't think, everybody's got their own decision to make, we each got to vote. I don't think we ought to move drastically. I think it's too great, 200 feet, but, you know, we've got churches in the area and schools in the area that essentially you could, you know, be pretty close to them, probably you're on Main Street. I think we have to look at that totality throughout the city. I'm not saying, I do think 1,200 feet is too far. But what keeps us, in your opinion, if we had a challenge in court?
The determination that's going to be made is our distance unreasonable, arbitrary, and capricious? That's what the court will look at. Look, down here at the Baptist church, how far is it across the street to that little gas station?
Well, if you go build
15
a
feet?
building,
That's 20 feet?
Yeah.
yeah, but if you go build a building, now if you went where it's in place now, it's different, but if you go build a building, it's
Still no more than 40 feet.
No.
I would think 40
Right,
feet.
40 would
I mean,
be.
I have to ask myself in this, what is it I'm fighting against? I mean, and again, I mean, I go up the road and go to these restaurants that sell it and eat, and, you know, I don't drink. It's my preference. I don't look down on people who do, you know, but I don't think we're going to end up, and as much as I'd love to say we would, I don't think that the Richmonds will sell out the shopping center and we'll end up with a Chili's and a Cheddar's and an Applebee's on the corner like we've got on Eastman Road. I don't think that's ever going to happen in the city of Churchill. I don't think we have the infrastructure and the demand for that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I don't know what it is really that we're trying to prevent as much that others aren't already preventing in other cities and the other adjoining municipalities that we already have. I mean, that's my question, is because to me, I agree. I mean, we could get very drastic with it if we ended up, you know, 200 feet or something like that. But I mean, I don't know. And you said there's nobody applying right now, so it's not like we're making this decision based on a certain person or certain business
Right.
that's at
Right.
hand, you know. I don't know what it is we're trying to prevent that within a good distance we could keep from, you know.
Well, I think what we're trying to prevent, in my view, is number one, we need to clean this up.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
You know, me and Chris has had several conversations. And number two, 1,200 feet is a big distance. You know, now what that distance is, the board decides. I can't say what it is, I don't know.
Well, you know, talking about churches, when we had the deal with Dr. Schilling is an elder at the church over there. And that church didn't have any issues with the on-site consumption of beer. Now, when it went to liquor, they had some issues, but.
But that's a state issue.
Yeah.
Right, right.
It's a real big difference.
Right. So, and we have we have laws, you know, as far as being close to the school, you can't purchase beer by the drink. I mean, the kids over at Volunteer can't skip school and come to the Mexican restaurant and buy a beer because everybody get arrested. So, I think 1,200 feet is excessive.
I know years ago, I don't think we've done it lately, but I remember years ago, when I was an alderman here, we went in several locations that the police department did that was selling beer to teenagers.
Right. They're checked now by ABC, and like even the one business that went out of business, I filed a couple of complaints and had them go, and they checked them and they complied with everything that they were supposed to. So, you know, they do check out on them. Like that, they kind of kept it.
So we don't go and
We don't
check.
have to do it no more, they do.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, state has ABC and they're responsible for that.
Building to building, and let's just say that if we reduce the distance today, And the next biggest one outside of us is 400 with Mount Carmel. Building to building, using an aerial measurement from what used to be Old Trio, Blano's or something like that now, to the what they call the building out there by volunteers.
Vocational.
The vocational building, 1,249 feet. Let's just call it 1,250 feet, building to building. Property line was barely 900 feet. Assuming they'd be the first ones to apply for it, there's, it's 1,249 feet right now, building to building. So if we change building to building, they qualify like that with our existing distance. So,
This, there's another Mexican restaurant moving into Riverview, correct? So there's
Oh,
another.
really?
yeah, it's a restaurant / grocery store. They sell a lot of
Oh,
like
okay.
Mexican groceries and stuff like that, yeah.
It's not owned by the same people.
No, it's a different person. The man actually bought that building and is running it out.
So they bought that from.
Do you know his name?
I do, I can't think of it. I've got his number in my phone.
Well, if we would adopt building to building, that's one, right? Where would we fall in the 1,200 feet distance if we went building to building, in your view? Would we do building to building and do distance too?
So in
Well-
other words, one change or two?
Yeah, you
No.
can, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're gonna change, the method of measurement, and you're also gonna consider changing distance, it'd just be a little less paperwork to do it.
But I guess that's what I mean, it's like in our current state, I think we need to be in sync with the distance measurement that all the others are using, right? And we've determined that is building to building.
Oh, yes, I think
Every other
that's,
municipality, the state uses
Well,
building to building, not property line to property
that's
line.
determined by the Supreme Court. They said you can't.
So
That method is
we
unreasonable.
almost need to do that.
Yes.
And when we do that, again, it's not like that we have anybody on the table, but I would say the first people that are going to come to the table are the one the gentleman's come to the meeting about the last 2 times. And he, at that point, and again, this is assumptive, but at that point, they're within our existing 1,200 feet. They're under that, so they can immediately get it regardless if we change distance or not. But I think as a board, we all but have to comply with the building to building distance to, otherwise, again, like you said a minute ago, we're going to open ourselves up to stuff.
We just can't, I don't think, defend it successfully.
Yeah.
We can
The
defend it.
1,200 feet,
No, the
Property-
building to building.
Property line to property line.
right. But the way it's being discussed, we're anywhere from 1,500 feet down to 400 feet in this county.
Yeah,
Municipalities and the
Oh,
county. We're
300.
well within that with
250 is Rogers.
Okay, so we're well within that with 1,200 feet.
Well, there's 2 others that are in our range. Everybody else is 400 or under. The county is the, what, 1,400, and Bulls Gap is 1,500.
Right.
So we're one of the 3. Everybody else is 400 or under. So.
What would be nice, but we can't do it, what would be nice if you could take case by case?
That's arbitrary.
You can't do
Yeah.
it.
You're fighting wisdom that
You
day.
can't do it. You know what I'm saying? You come ask for beer permit, you look at, but you just can't do it, you just gotta set it.
There's got to be objective criteria.
And I would think it has to be consistent.
Yeah.
No.
And that's what Judge Wright ruled in the Squantum case, that wasn't consistent.
No. So, I think we're all in agreement, we definitely building the building, right? So,
Yeah, I make a motion that we adopt that.
what about distance? I mean, I say this, I mean, you and I have had this conversation, should we deal with the distance?
I think we should.
That's your pleasure.
I think so too. If we're going to, as a board, change it, or if anyone on the board wants to bring it up to change it, I think might as well go ahead and do it while we're here to do it and be done with that part of it too. Because I don't think that discussion amongst us members is going to change anytime in the next month, 2 months, the next 2 years realistically, I think me and 2 of the others here are on for next. I don't think it's going to change with the current board we have. Unless
Chad, what's your opinion on distance?
My opinion, I'll give it to you, like Churchill's tough because we don't have this downtown business district like some of these other municipalities do, where I feel that's why they lowered their restrictions, because they're packed in there. Churchill's is so much different that there's almost a residence beside all of our businesses. So I think we gotta take our residents, because that's who supports us and takes care of us. We gotta make sure that we take care of them too.
There are way more that are zoned that would allow this,
Correct.
that are, I mean, if you look at this zoning map, there's way more B, 2, 3, and 4 than there is, you know, anywhere near the highways and the streets, essentially. I mean, you know, we're not. So,
Well, if we go building to building, what are we taking off footage wise, Chris, the way the bird flies?
The volunteer one's a little over 900 feet if we measured from property line to property line. And if you go property line to the business, it's not much more. But the school sets back so far off.
So what I'm trying to say, maybe I may be wrong here, it's just thinking out loud. If you change building to building, and you're gonna gain essentially 300 feet, right?
On that,
Then why would you drop your distance 300 feet?
That's my
And you're
point.
saying consistent. That's all I'm saying.
I,
Because who's gonna come in here and they say, well, you dropped it 300 feet, let's see if we can drop it 200 more. And I gotta go back to what Chad says, we've got a lot of R1 in businesses here. You know, you can't go by the way the city of Roswell is, because they're totally different we are. I'm just thinking out loud, that's just.
I mean, unless we're willing to implement something that gives us the privilege and ability to restrict the permits for the consumption of in zoning, in specific zoning areas, and I think we're crossing a fine line there, and this is just from a real estate side of things. I think when you get into starting to restricting the zoning codes, or being able to say, okay, well, this is B3, but you can't do this, you can't do that, I think it gets a little messy there, in my opinion. I think what we're dealing with more than anything is the building to building, and if we want to do the distance. The residences, it's gonna be very hard, if you look at our zoning map, it's gonna be very hard to avoid having one of these businesses in the way we're currently zoned. It's gonna be very, very hard to not be within that distance of a house. Almost everywhere you go in the city of Churchill, no matter what. So trying, you know, I'm not saying not discuss that at a later point or not potentially I think our police force done a phenomenal job of what little bit of crap we had to deal with down there when Rebel Yell was in. I think we've got a good system in place for that now currently, but the two things for sure I think on the table would be the distance measurement and whether we're going to lower our distance.
I think we need two separate motions, because what I think we all agree, we need to change the measure, the way we measure.
Yeah.
Get that done, then we can go on to do we
Discuss
need
the
to
distance
change
from
the
there.
distance or not.
Yeah, we can do it that way, right?
Sure.
I'll make a motion that we change or at least put into the wording, very clear wording in our ordinance that we measure building to building on the property line measurements for this.
I'll second.
Discussion, so that would really essentially be about, tell me if I'm reading this wrong, about 300 feet if you go build.
Well, for that
Just for
one
that
instance,
specific.
that specific example, yeah, you're right.
Okay.
I think 2 through 2, I think that would actually probably be our only current one that is even expressing any interest in it. right now.
have you done the distance from New Life Church to that building, go building to building?
No, I can real quick.
I know we had it from
Yeah, I
several
did.
different ways we measured it, but I don't know if we done building to building.
Yeah, I did. 1,253.89.
Okay.
So that's building to building.
And the Kenjo is 700 feet.
You got Food City in the church behind it.
Well, now, Food City, it's, well, okay, I measured Food City to this New Life Church. I didn't measure the distance
Right.
from Food City.
'Cause
And then you've
Providence
got-
is
it's
just
from that
right-
road down here, right
Yeah.
across the road.
Yeah. And Providence is directly behind Food City.
Food City, yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
So-
aren't these, when they built the church, aren't these places gonna be grandfathered in? Just because somebody
I think-
starts.
Well, Ken Joe's was.
Ken Joe's is grandfathered in, that's
Food
why.
City
it's-
built first too, so
Yeah.
they got their permit before the church,
That's
before
what,
that.
that's
so
what I'm
it-
saying, just because somebody opens up a church.
Are you sure? Because I think Providence has been there.
No.
They go after Food City.
Did they
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Food City's been there that long?
Yeah, it's been there that long.
You know, I think we need to clear up when we do this too. We have a motion and a second right now on this.
Yeah, you probably ought to do it.
Yeah, we need to deal with this and then I'll mention this other way. Any more discussion on this? Building to build, what's your motion again?
I make a motion that we clarify our language in the current ordinance, that our measurement is taken from building to building. And if that needs to also be as in-depth and clear so that our citizens understand that too, that it's the, you know, like again, we're going from the vocational building, it's the first building or the closest building on the property to the closest building on the property. If we need that clarity in there, that's fine, but the motion would be that we clarify in our current ordinance, the measurement is taken from building to building on the properties that are in question.
And you second that. I did. Any more discussion? Call roll.
Kathy Christian,
Yes.
Keith Gibson.
Yes.
James Grigsby.
Yes.
Ken Luster.
Yes.
Buck Tipton.
Yes,
Michael Walker.
Yes.
Dennis Steele.
Aye. And what that does too, it cleans ours up because it's a little vague.
Yeah, but I need to look at that other issue too, so I'll make recommendations about that.
And then
On-site,
also,
off-site.
we need to clarify what you said on site. We need to clean that up too. And you're gonna research that?
Yeah,
Cool. And then what we do, look at distance later, is that what y'all saying, or we gonna do it that?
We can do it today. Personally, I don't think it needs to be changed, but I know some thinks it should, but that's what we're here for, so.
Well,
What current businesses outside of the Mexican restaurant, and I guess you'd call this new one the Mexican restaurant, are there any other restaurants that changing this distance could or would affect? I'm just currently right now that you all can think of that I'm missing.
Probably Randall's, if they ever wanted to sell beer.
The closest one
You're
would be
asking
Enbridge.
hypothetically.
Yeah, just hypothetically, just
Yeah.
thinking about this.
Probably.
in
Your
overall
restaurants would be Roma's. I don't,
Roman,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't, you know, they're close to the church and close to the school.
Well, with Randall's, you've got the church right up, Union's probably closer than,
Church of God, Elam,
Yeah.
Indian Ridge, all three of those. Yeah.
so.
And
And
then
Even New Life over there.
what about the?
Maple Leaf and
Yeah.
Drew's on Main,
Yeah,
I think is what
yeah.
it is.
And then there was a restaurant in the shopping center.
That's the Maple
Okay,
Leaf.
that's Maple Leaf.
That's Maple Leaf, okay.
But it used to be Cowboys, and I think
That
y'all
was the issue
said
back
that's
then.
before.
They ended up getting
Yeah.
bigger then. too.
Right, right.
So those are probably the ones that are currently, unless somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to build a Chili's on the corner down here beside Pizza Plus.
that's the reason I stated earlier, case by case basis.
Yes. Be nice, but
Yeah.
ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
So,
But I
But you
think,
don't know.
but I think we should learn something from the fiasco at Rebel Yell. I think a lot of the problems that we had would have been avoided if they'd have had a beer license, because the biker groups that were coming in to buy liquor by the drink wouldn't have been as interested in a glass of beer or a can of beer, so.
Who does that, like, those folks like Kathy talk about that business? Who goes in there? Do we go in there? You said they have to consume so much food. Who does that inspection?
So like, it's part of the permit process that we have in place already that would regulate that. But like I said, even if you look at the state license, and I looked at it due to that business, there's a couple different ones, even getting a liquor license through the state of Tennessee, that you get different ones. There's like 3 different ones that I'm aware of. One's like to run a liquor store, package store. One of them is you have to serve so much food. One of them's just a true bar. So there's.
Yeah, but what about the beer factor? I kind of erased the liquor license because we don't control that anyway.
Right.
So what about the beer side of it? Would you have to consume so much food?
I think we have it in place in our current permit. I don't have it in front of me about the.
It's under 8-220.
Right.
Can you read that, please?
Let's see, where you're, so restaurant means any kind of public place kept, used, maintained, advertised, held out to the public as a place where meals are served, where meals are actually and regularly served without sleeping accommodations, such place being provided with an adequate sanitary kitchen, with a separate dining room, suitable equipment, and seating capacity of at least 50 people at tables or booths, and having employed therein a sufficient number and kind of employees to prepare, cook, and serve suitable food for its customers. At least 2 meals per day shall be served on at least 6 days a week, with exceptions of holidays, vacation, and periods of redecorating. Serving of such meals shall be the principal business conducted on the restaurant's premises. No signs advertising the sale of beer for on-premises consumption shall be erected or allowed on the restaurant premises.
So we've got all that stuff in place, we've just never had to get to that point because we've always, the distance restrictions got us out, but it would be up to us to go in and inspect those and make sure they meet the criteria before we issue the permit.
If we would go in after, if we.
I think we would, I think, my opinion, if we got a permit and would they meet the first part of the distance, then we would have to check the other things prior to issuing it. It'd be up to us.
Well, what's y'all's thoughts since we changed building to building, we wait, if somebody comes in and requests a beer permit, then we can look at the distance.
Well,
But,
then you force them to go through a rejection
okay,
and appeal to city council. If you're gonna consider it, I'd rather see it considered now rather than after the fact.
Would we be opening ourselves up to liability if we reject somebody on distance? And let's say a big restaurant comes, if it was to come in and ask us to change it, then we change it. Are we gonna be open to liability to catering to a bigger restaurant instead of a smaller one?
were people asked before the big one
Yes.
come in?
I don't know that it would open us up, and I'm not an attorney, he is. I'm not as worried about it opening us up to the legal part. It's just gonna look, we're gonna look like idiots. We're gonna look like the only reason we change it is because of Chili's or whoever else wants to come in here. I think that's the biggest thing.
I wonder if some of these places, you know, I don't know how they go about selecting places. If somebody had come to Churchill and looked, and they looked and see that, well, we got 1,200 feet, and there's a church or there's a school, we're not even going to be considered for that then.
Did we not change that in the beginning because of Food City? We got Food City down here because Mount Carmel would, right?
Mount Carmel would not give
Right.
them a beer permit.
And so, I don't, you know, I'm glad we did and that kind of thing, but I don't think we want to be in that position again with some big retailer or somebody that wants to come in, you know?
I mean, we've spent 45 minutes discussing it. I think that it would be more efficient and it's fresh on our minds. I think we should change the distance while we're talking about it and it's fresh on everybody's mind.
And keep in mind that if you have a beer permit, you can sell alcohol too. It won't take very long for them to want to sell the liquor too.
Well, that's a state
Just
thing
FYI.
and they could do
They're
liquor
telling us
anyway.
About that,
So
yeah.
I'm just saying,
We're talking about
We
what
more or
we
less
can
push
control.
that off the table now.
Yeah.
But the good thing, on beer permit, if we issue them, we can control it.
That's, yeah, it goes back to what I said in that one
We
meeting.
can
It gives us
restrict that.
some control versus no
No,
control.
correct,
Right.
correct.
Now, there's 3 factors on alcohol. One, liquor by the drink, the liquor store, correct?
Mhm.
And what's the third one?
It would be the
Sell on the
restaurant.
go.
Right, yeah.
Because I understand, I don't know, but I understand Mount Carmel's getting liquor store. I just heard that, I don't know if that's true.
That is the buzz, that they're gonna put it in there beside the wholesale tobacco and shopping center potentially.
Well, that's what we're here for, special call meetings, so if we're gonna do the distance, you know.
Well, I think we need to change the distance, and looking at that, you know, the local, the city, 400 feet is the most, I believe I see on there. I make a motion, we change it to 400 feet.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
The Mexican restaurant now down near the motel, they can get a beer permit now?
They would be able to with our building to building allowance.
That's one.
They wouldn't,
And they're probably the furthest one we have,
yeah.
if we're looking at them. I mean, that, you know, in those restaurants we all named, they're probably the furthest from the location. that we
Well, that
have.
Rebel Yell too.
Yeah, Raymond Yell's right at 1250, I think, so it may be a little bit further.
They're close.
Yeah.
Any discussion on the distance?
Kathy Christian,
Yes.
Keith Gibson,
Yes.
James Grigsby,
Yes.
Ken Luster,
No.
Buck Tipton,
Yes,
Michael Walker,
Yes.
Dennis Deal.
No. Motion carries.